Hi, everyone. We are back talking to Father Panagiotis. Hi, Baba.
Hi, Olympia.
Hi. This is Stolen Homes, and we are on our 7th episode. So last episode, we left off talking about how Va was at a university. You were at Notre Dame?
Yes.
Yes. And he decided to totally switch his life around and go into the priesthood, where he went to Holy Cross and pursued his Master's of Divinity. And that's where we are. So,
Yeah.
So how was that experience going into that, and how did you feel totally changing your life at that point?
Yeah, it was really a major change in so many different ways, because I was trained to be in the sciences. I was trained to be an engineer. I spent 6 years studying engineering, getting 2 degrees in that, in chemical engineering, and suddenly I found myself in a in a place where it was all about philosophy and theology and and things like that, which I never wrote a paper until I wrote my thesis for my master's in chemical engineering. But that was not a paper in the same way as you write when you do a paper for a midterm in theology, for example. So it was very difficult to switch from one to the other. It took me some time to adjust.
Right.
And and being in the liberal arts side of things, it was kind of difficult to adjust to the mentality, to the way of thinking.
Yeah.
But I finally did. But the major thing for me in moving from engineering to theology, and especially being with mostly Greek Orthodox people, it brought back to my mind something that I was basically suppressing for many years, and that was the experience of the invasion. Now I was among people who knew about it. They will ask me questions about it. They will, I was reminded continually about what happened in Cyprus in 1974. And and I had to address it. I remember one time going to confession and telling my spiritual father, basically tears coming down my eyes, and talking to him about it, because there was a lot of pain in me, and
Right.
I needed to release that pain. So that started happening. So it was a good thing for me. It was healthy for me now that I was addressing the issue that was hidden in my
That was
heart.
bothering you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hidden. I was suppressing it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it.
Yeah.
I never listened to the news, so I won't hear anything about what was happening in Cyprus. I wouldn't go to any of the demonstrations, that people would do in Washington, D.C. or in New York at the United Nations or anything like that. I had no desire to be involved in anything that brought up the pain of the invasion.
Right. So do you think people knew about it because they were of Greek heritage for the most part? So that they knew about it because of that? Not necessarily because America knew about it, but because of their background?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well, all the years primarily at both City College as well as Notre Dame, I was among Americans who didn't even know where Cyprus was, or, what happened. Definitely, they had no idea. I had to tell them. And then they, people would look at you, tell them what happened to your own country and to you and your family, and people look at you, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, they don't know what to do with that
They know what to do with that. They don't know what to say to you. They don't know whether they should comfort you, and you don't want any comfort anyway from them. But, they're at a loss, so the conversation changes.
Yeah.
Now, when you are among mostly Greek Orthodox people and mostly Greek people, I would say, even Greek Americans, they knew about it, and it was brought up continually in the media, in the Greek-speaking media or in the Greek American media. The IHEPANs have been working on that issue ever since it happened to this day, and so every time the invasion anniversary comes up, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's sending emails out. So at that time, of course, there were no emails, but there were printed publications that would have pictures that would show destroyed homes and the destroyed churches and destroyed hotels and and they would talk about the people that were killed, and there were pictures of the refugees in the camps, in the tent camps, living in tents.
So you couldn't run away from it this time.
So this time I couldn't get away from it. Yeah. So I had to confront it, and I remember my first reaction was in confession, talking to my spiritual father that I had at the Holy Cross, who was a very kind man, and he knew everything that happened. He was, of course, older than me, so he remembered what happened.
Yeah.
And I just poured my heart out and told him about it, and he was very sympathetic, of course, and kind of comforting.
That's good.
But that was my first opening my heart up to begin to find healing, basically, and to kind of let go of all the feelings and all the things that I had accumulated over the years. So that was the first thing. The other thing that happened, and of course I remember in that conversation when I raised the question, which had been in my mind for years, why did God allow this to happen? Okay, so that's a theological question. Why did God allow this to happen? And I think that's the beginning of my search for answers in a deeper way, in a theological way. And I remember him handing me a text from the Old Testament where he said something like, your temples and your feasts and your whatever, your celebrations are nothing to me. All I want is your heart. Okay? And I said, okay.
Okay.
All right. So there we go. So perhaps our heart was not turned to God as it should have been. So our temples and our homes and our whatever land didn't matter because our hearts were not turned to God. And that's probably what happened. Okay, that's one answer. It was not a full answer for me. It was not fully satisfying either.
Right.
But it was the beginning of me finding answers, at least, that made more sense than what I had in my mind before.
Okay.
And before it was more hurt and anger, perhaps, and just disappointment and things like that. Now it was like, okay, we must have done something wrong along the way, and God did not protect us. Okay?
So like you had a perspective of almost like punishment from it at that point? Because that's what it sounds like.
I never believed in punishment. I never believed that God punishes people in that way, But I think God removes His grace and allows things to happen that would not happen if His grace is protecting us. So when you are not close to God,
things might happen.
Okay, when you are close to God, God's grace protects you. When you remove yourself from the protection of God by moving away from Him, then of course things can happen, and anything can happen, and bad things will always happen. So I think the first answer I received was that we lost the grace of God because we moved away from Him somehow. And that made sense to me.
Okay.
Because I remember that Cyprus I remember when I was a child and growing up as a child, people were more pious, people were more dedicated to God. As they accumulated wealth and built better homes and they accumulated more wealth, I think people became more arrogant. And I'm talking about in general, thinking about the country as a whole. And I'm thinking that the events of the last 2 or 3 years before the invasion were a division among people, even in the church. A division in the church that was the biggest sign that we had moved away from God and were fighting over power. The leadership was fighting over power and over who is more important.
There were egos.
Egos, yeah. So I think for the first time I could see more clearly that we, as a peoples, we moved away from God in several ways, became more materialistic, became more selfish, self-centered, egotistical, and our leadership was more after power and money, and rather than, and I don't want to criticize anybody in particular, but I'm saying in general, the leadership of the people had moved away from God, and the people began to move away from God as well.
Right.
So the protection and the grace and the cover of God's protection was withdrawn by God because we rejected His grace by doing those things.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's a theological perspective that I began to acquire and understand. And my journey or my inquiry into this continued, and I didn't give up. I wanted to know more and I wanted to understand it better.
Right.
So I said, okay, maybe there are other reasons why this happened. So, and it wasn't until probably 2 years later when I went to Holy Cross, Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Boston in 1984. Okay. And in August of 1984, and I even took some summer classes or August classes. It was a special session that they had, and I took 2 classes at that time just to kick off my process of my education so that I can finish as soon as possible. So, and it took me another 3 years to complete. It was a 4-year program. I finished in 3 years because I wasn't required to take Greek and other things that were... But the second year, in 86, after I finished my second year and I was going into my third year, which would have been my last year, I went to Cyprus, and then from there I asked my parents to help me out.
You visited? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You went back and visited?
I went in 85 and I went in 86 as well. In 85,
I didn't know that.
In 85, I took Yaya, my mother, your Yaya, and we went to the Holy Land together.
Oh, yeah.
In 1985.
I vaguely remember that.
It was my first visit to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
We spent 5 days. We went with some tourist group and they took us to all the tourist things. But we managed to...
she must have loved that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she loved it.
She's so cute.
And we managed to actually get out of the group at some points and take our own trips and go to the Holy Sepulchre, spend time there.
So that must have been the first time you saw her in how many years?
No, I had visited before. I had visited in 3 years after I came to New York. I went back when
you visited.
Theodoros was here, and he encouraged me to go and see them.
Okay.
So that was very good. And that,
good.
This in '85 I went, and I went to the Holy Land, which was a good experience for me. Again, it was going back to the roots, going back to the places where the Lord Jesus Christ lived, and where he was crucified, where he rose from the dead. And visiting other sites too, and that's the first time I went to Masada, for example.
Oh man, you went with Yaya to Masada?
Yes.
Oh wow,
that's
an amazing place.
Yeah, and it was really, amazing. And then we went to. Anyway, so that was only 5 days though, so I didn't see it as much.
Right,
but it was
still,
my first.
You saw a lot.
Yeah, it was my first visit, which was excellent. And Cyprus is so close to
I know.
Israel. It's just a 40-minute flight. Less than 40 minutes.
You go up and then you come back down.
Yeah, by the time you get up, to 30,000 feet, you begin to descend.
Come right back down.
Yeah. You don't even go to 30,000. I don't think there isn't enough time. Anyway, so we. So we saw that, and that was a good experience for me.
Yeah.
Back to Cyprus again, of course. My parents had settled in in the new home, and my sister was already married, I think, at the time.
Was this in Ayia Napa?
Yes, in Ayia Napa, and but in '86 I went back.
Okay.
And that was going into my third year and the last year at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Boston, and so. And I stayed for most of the summer. I went at the beginning of June when school finished, and we had no classes, and I stayed until the end of August before school started again.
Okay.
So I was in Cyprus for such a long time. So I would travel actually, and I would go to monasteries. And I went to the monasteries in Cyprus. I went to the women's monasteries to visit. And then I went to the men's monasteries as well.
Okay.
And one of my friends that I met in Boston, Marios and Maria, they lended me their car.
Oh.
Their car from their business, and you can have it as long as you want.
In Cyprus?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I went to spend 4 days at Stavrovouni Monastery. I went 4 days at another monastery up on Trodos, Trooditissa Monastery. I went to Giko Monastery. I went to some of the women's.
Cyprus is filled with monasteries.
And I stayed for, like 4 or 5 days at
Right.
the time. And because I had plenty of time, I had nothing to do. I was just there, and I was searching. I was searching
Right.
to understand more, to understand how monasteries function. I wanted to know how the services go. I wanted to know. It was, for me, it was really a learning experience.
An enriching experience. Yeah.
And the thing that amazed me is that all the monasteries were full of young men and young women. The women's monasteries were, and all of these monasteries were empty before the invasion.
Oh, interesting.
They would have 2 old men, 2 old women. Everything was dying before the invasion. And now, after the invasion, all the monasteries were full.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not talking about 10 monks or 3 monks or 20 monks, 40 monks.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I mean, Stavrovouni had to build an entire wing of rooms to accommodate the new monks that were coming in.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's good.
And so did the other monasteries. They're all expanding their space so that they can accommodate the young men that were coming into monasticism.
How old are these monasteries, out of curiosity?
Stavrovouni has been there since the 4th century.
Oh, my God. That's very old.
Trooditissa, maybe 1,000 years.
So in the beginning of Christianity, like they've been there from the start.
And so was St. Neophytos, 1,000 years.
That's amazing.
And some of the others. I mean, we're talking about a long history of monasticism in Cyprus that was very strong for many centuries.
Yeah.
But at the time, in the 60s and 70s, when we were becoming very secular and very materialistic, okay, right before the invasion, the monasteries were empty. Okay? Yeah. So there was no monasticism anymore. It was like some old men dying out, and all the monasteries were closing up, basically, or they were in disrepair because nobody was there to fix them. Neglected, yeah. No. So we have this, I see this experience, and I see there were some of my classmates who were...
Oh my gosh.
I found them at Stavrovouni, 2 of them.
Oh my gosh.
They were a little younger than me, maybe a couple of years younger than me, but they were monks at Stavrovouni. And then I found another one...
Classmates from Cyprus, like before you had gone to university?
From the English school. From the
English school, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then I found one at Trooditissa, and then one of my other classmates who went to England and became a chemist, came back, and he was becoming a priest at the time.
Oh my goodness.
So
that's awesome.
This was awesome, but it was also challenging my thoughts. Why is this happening? What's going on here? And then sometime in July, I didn't have much more to do. I traveled all over Cyprus, went to every monastery available.
Saw the island.
I sat down with my parents and I said to them, look, I think I need to go to Mount Athos and check it out.
Whoa.
I also had on my mind the possibility maybe God was calling me to be a monk. Okay. I didn't know. But then I wanted to explore that too.
Can you explain really quick for people who don't know what Mount Athos is? Obviously, every Orthodox person knows what it is, but there are a lot of people who listen who don't know. Can you just explain quickly?
Yeah, Mount Athos is a peninsula in northern Greece, which is basically cut off from the rest of the world. And it has about 20 major monasteries and about another 100 communities spread out on the peninsula, which is very rocky and very wild. It's very green because it has a lot of it gets a lot of rain and it gets snow on the top of the Mount Athos, the peak of the mountain.
Of the mountain, yeah.
Yeah, which is at the edge of the peninsula. But but it's basically cut off from the rest of the world, and it goes back 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years from the 10th century.
Yeah.
It was established as a monastic enclave, basically, and at that time it was so far away from everything, and nobody, once you got on, it would be very hard to come off, and it was very hard for anyone to visit.
Yeah.
Today, of course, it's much easier, but the only access is by boat, because they have eliminated the land access. They have blocked it off and gated it and barricaded it. Nobody can get through that unless it's an emergency, and then they open it up for the emergency. But yeah, so I was surprised when I ended up at Mount Athos. At that time, it was easy to get on Mount Athos. All you needed to do is to use your passport or your ID card, and they will let you on. And they had no limits as to how many people get on the mountain because not very many people went. Nowadays,
they're much stricter.
You have to, and now you have to make an appointment months ahead. Okay, not only to get onto the mountain, to get on the boat, to get onto
the mountain,
the peninsula, but you also have to make an appointment for every night that you're going to stay with the monastery that you're going to stay in.
Oh, man.
Otherwise, they won't let you on because they have so many visitors. They have thousands of visitors. They have Russians, they have Bulgarians, they have Romanians, and they have Orthodox people from around the world that visit. Right. So they have a limit to how many they accept.
Do they let non-Orthodox people on? Yeah.
They do, but
in a limited
it's
sense.
Even more difficult for them to be on.
Yeah.
So I don't think they will let more than 10 non-Orthodox a day or something like that, and they have to be accompanied by Orthodox people and things like that. So it's a monastic community. It's like walking into the home of somebody, but it's an entire peninsula. So
with 20 homes.
Yeah, with 20 huge
20
monasteries,
huge monasteries
and over 100 other smaller communities.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
So at that time, in the 70s, 60s and 70s, Mount Athos was also deteriorating because Greece had become very secular. The Orthodox world was becoming very secular. Russia was under communism, and all of those monasteries were all in disrepair because there were no young monks to work to fix them, take care of them, and no funds, to repair things because you need money too. So when I went in '86, I was amazed that the monasteries were packed.
Wow.
Okay? And they were also building and expanding to accommodate more monks and the visitors, of course, that were coming to visit. Although the visitors were not as many in those days as they are today. And then I realized that there were like 3 or 4 monasteries that had groups of Cypriot monks.
Oh, wow.
Okay, like 8 here, 10 there, 18 there. And then I found a group of like 40 Cypriots in New Skit in Nea Skidi, which were all together under a Cypriot spiritual father, and they were all young. They were all in their 20s. Most of them were younger than me. I think the oldest of them was maybe, the one who was leading them at the time was a year younger than me.
So he experienced the invasion
that was Father Athanasius, who became Bishop Athanasius of Limassol.
I love him. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Yeah. So that experience of finding all of these Cypriots, about 100 Cypriots on Mount Athos at the time.
That's a lot of people.
I was very surprised. They were all monastics. They all some of them had left businesses. They had left jobs, very good jobs they were making a lot of money, working in Europe and whatever. Some of them from England, some of them from Australia, some of them from America. I had classmates from Holy Cross that were monks at Simonopetra.
Wow. They left Holy Cross and went to...
Yeah, they're still there.
Yeah.
Some of them are still there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that really impressed me, and theologically I began to kind of see patterns that I thought were very interesting. And the major conclusion I came to was that the invasion of Turkey, the invasion of Cyprus by Turkey, was like an earthquake in the Orthodox world, especially the Greek-speaking Orthodox world.
Yeah.
It shook them up. It shook all of us up. Okay? But it shook us up in a way that we had to reconsider the path of life, which was to the good life of having plenty of material things and partying and enjoying ourselves and whatever else. I remember I met a young man at one of the monasteries, the monastery of Dionysiou. I stayed 4 days there. And he was a party boy in Athens as a student. Because in Athens, the University of Athens, you can stay as many years as you want, to get your degree. So his father was very wealthy. He bought him a BMW in Athens, having a BMW.
Yeah.
And he was driving around and partying and having great time. And suddenly, one day, some monks from Mount Athos came and gave a presentation at the university, and he attended.
Wow.
And that turned him around completely.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So, but I think that others also, they had reconsidered what their parents had done, seeking wealth and material things. And they realized that you can have all the wealth and all the material things. A wave of Turks in their tanks can really destroy everything that you've worked on for all your life.
Yeah.
And that was the message that I got from that, which was there is no wealth on this earth that can bring you happiness and security. You need to turn to God at some point. Yeah. Whether you have it or you don't have it, you need to turn to God. And the greatest wealth of all is that relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that is why I was also becoming a priest. Without necessarily justifying it that way, I concluded with that in the sense of money has no value when you're not close to God. And if you have the material things, you're going to move away from God. Right. Because then those things become your God. Those things become the purpose of your life. And that should not be the purpose of our lives. The kingdom of God should be the purpose of our lives. And we should be preparing ourselves for that by being, by having a relationship with God that is close enough that He will open the doors to His kingdom to us. And that's really my final conclusion that I came up with respect to the invasion. So the invasion, which was an evil thing, it was a negative and evil thing and a painful thing, suddenly turned into something that was spiritually uplifting. Because if all these thousands of people were being saved in the process of, through the process of monasticism or becoming, coming closer to God, therefore, even an evil thing like that, God can turn it around and make it good. Right. And that was my conclusion and the point that I had in my mind.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me. And even though I didn't think I should stay on Mount Athos and become a monk, because I felt the calling for me was to become a priest in the world and help people in a different way, I took from that experience of Mount Athos, which at that time had more than 2,000 monks. It went from, in the 70s, it was declining and it was having basically a few hundred, maybe 200 or 300 old monks in their 80s that were dying off.
Yeah.
Suddenly, right after the invasion, you have an inflow of 2,000 young men in their 20s who changed the entire landscape of Mount Athos. And there's life everywhere. There's beautiful singing. There are liturgies everywhere.
I know. Their chanting is probably unbelievable.
The chanting was amazing. It was unbelievable. It was like I thought I was in heaven. I was there for 3 weeks.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. Good, and I walked from place to place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have much with me, just a little backpack. And I walked from place to place, and I would spend 4 days in one place, 4 days in another place, and kind of absorb it and walk through the mountains and take the paths from one monastery to the other. And then just dedicate to my life to prayer along with the monks. And in those days, Mount Athos had no hot water.
I know.
Had hardly any electricity.
Right.
I mean, there was probably 2 or 3 monasteries that had generators for electricity. Yeah. It was dark at night. It was all in candlelight. There was no hot water to take a shower.
Happiest people in the world. Mm-hmm.
It was showers. If you took a shower every 3 or 4 days or 5 days, whatever, it was cold water. But I did not mind it at all. It was really, I think after the first week was tough getting into that. But after the first week, I adjusted. And the next 2 weeks were the most amazing spiritual experience for me.
That's awesome.
I encountered elders who became saints later,
Right.
like Father Paisios.
Yeah.
I encountered another elder who showed me and taught me how to do the Jesus prayer, how to pray, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, and how to do it in a systematic way to help me spiritually, and I still use it.
Well, yeah.
I encountered people like Father Athanasius, who became later Bishop Athanasius in Cyprus. I encountered others who went on to become priests later. A young man who met also Father Paisios, and he was doing his, at the time, he was doing his degree in medicine, and he graduated from the University of Thessaloniki and became a pediatrician, and returned to Cyprus, and then eventually he became a priest as well. So he's
Wow.
both a doctor and a priest.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So and I my network of people who had turned their lives to God
Right.
just expanded tremendously
Wow.
through that, and my understanding of why these evil things happen to us, that in the end God can turn even the evil into good if we turn ourselves to Him. That was a major theological breakthrough for me.
Did you ever talk about that with Yaya and Bapu?
Oh yes, of course, many times.
How did they feel about
Oh yeah,
that?
they were
Ecstatic? They
oh,
agreed?
Yeah. They agreed.
Yeah.
They understood. They
They were
understood.
so
It was very,
special.
for them, it was like a confirmation of what they already understood in a way, because they were very in tune with God's
Yeah.
grace and will throughout their lives. Yeah, so then the last year I came back, right after I finished my journey through Mount Athos, I came back to the United States. And in fact, I brought my mother back with me to the United States, and both my parents, and
Yeah.
they attended
Theophilus'
my
wedding.
brother's wedding. Yeah, so, and it was at that time when I came back from Mount Athos that I met your mother, and we began to talk about possibility of marriage.
Right.
By the end of that last year, we were married.
Yeah.
So I left Holy Cross and went to Catholic University to do a PhD at the time,
Right.
in early Christian studies and early theology of the church, the early church and the history of the church. Having now found my path in a way in peace, the path to the priesthood was a peaceful one in the sense that I knew I was becoming a priest.
Okay.
I knew that I was dedicating my life to God. I was comfortable with it. But I wanted more knowledge, and that's why I went to Catholic University. They had a patristics program, which nobody else had. They still have it, actually. We moved to Arlington, and your mom got a job, and I went to school, and
Yes.
we kind of went from there. But
And you got your PhD in
yeah, and I
early
got my
Christian.
PhD in early Christian studies, and
Yeah.
I found in that the confirmations of all kinds of things, including the theological understandings of the development of Christianity in the first 400, 500, 600 years, and the proclamations of the church and the arguments. I read all the texts on the arguments in favor of one against the other, or in favor of the one against the other, whatever it was. I read all the patristic texts, mostly in Greek, because that's the language in which they were, which was delightful for me. And it gave me a confidence to speak about theology,
Right.
and to speak about the theology of the church and why Christianity is what it is, and why the Christians believe the things they believe, and how those things were crystallized and kind of settled through the centuries,
Right.
based on the scriptures, of course, and the apostles' teachings, but how they were also expressed in a language that was perhaps new in some ways, but also based on the scriptures. And that was for me, the years at Catholic University in that program was probably the greatest gift as far as theology that I got, because the depth at which we studied those things
Yeah.
was
You
amazing.
just soaked it in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. It was amazing. And
Did anybody-
good professors, and good discussions in class and things like that.
Well, of course, yeah. And did anybody there know about the invasion, or was that you were more immersed in that at Holy Cross because of the Greek background? But did anybody understand it at all? Did that ever come up during your PhD?
Yes, yes, it did. It would come up, but I was more at peace with it, knowing that even from that evil thing, something good has come, which one of the good things was that I was closer to God.
Right.
Okay, and along with me, all these other people that I had met.
Thousands and thousands of people,
who were closer to God.
Right.
And they were dedicated to God. And the reason is because they understood through the invasion that the material world is not going to give you the satisfaction that God will give you if you turn to Him directly.
Right.
And that became my one of my mottos, in the sense of when I teach, when I would teach, or when I will express some of those. People will ask me, about the invasion, and to this day, people ask me, and I say, well,
yeah.
It wasn't all bad. There were good things that came out of it, and I've been saying
I do remember you saying that too when I was little. I remember you saying that. Not maybe to the extent, obviously, because I couldn't conceptualize entirely what you were talking about, but I think I remember you talking about that too.
Yeah. But I don't want to say that it was that the invasion has not left pain in me. I still have pain from it. It's just that I direct my pain to the hands of God, and I surrender to Him, because I know that He allowed this for whatever reasons, and even though He allowed it, something good came out of it.
Right.
Okay. In some ways, not in every way, but in some ways.
Obviously, there's still things
there's a lot of evil
wrong.
that happened, and people who suffered, and
still to this day,
people who died, and thousands of people who died. So I'm not diminishing how bad that was. I am saying that even from that evil thing, some good things have come.
Right.
Or a consequence of that, consequences from that have become something good.
Right. So, to shift a little bit.
Yeah.
So after that, Ian, you ended up getting your PhD, and then my older brother, Strati, was born.
Yes.
Soon after. Or no, he was born in the middle of all that, of you going and getting your PhD,
yes,
correct?
In the middle of that, yeah. It was at the end of my third year, I believe.
Yeah.
So I had finished my comprehensive exams, and I was it was not as intense for me.
Right, then in the beginning.
And I was already ordained. And I already had a small little parish in Fredericksburg, Virginia at the time.
Oh, yeah. He was born in Virginia.
Yeah, he was born in Virginia. He was born in Alexandria, Virginia. we still lived in the north. We lived in Spring Hill or Springfield.
One of the two.
Yeah.
So
Springfield, Virginia.
From there, eventually you made the decision somehow, which you can talk about, but you made the decision to take your whole family to Cyprus.
Yeah.
And then that's where I was born. But how was that decision made to go back to the place that you basically vowed to never go back to permanently? How was that decision made? How did you end up saying, okay, maybe I should take my family here?
Well, there were a lot of things happened, but a major thing that happened is that, I went back as a priest, to visit Cyprus again, and I brought your mom, and
yes, she met everybody.
She met everybody, and the priest of Ayanaba, who was getting older, he was 80 years old. He wanted an assistant. That's what he wanted. So the Archbishop of Cyprus sent him a young man, and he says, I don't want him, so send him back.
Okay.
Then he sent him a second young man, and Father Antonius, he kept him for a couple of weeks. He says, I don't want him. So the Archbishop called him to Lefkosia. The Archbishop Chrysostomos, the first of Cyprus.
Okay.
He called him to Lefkosia, and he says to him, Father Antonius, I send you one priest you don't like. I send you a second one you don't want him. You're 80 years old.
Right.
So what are we going to do? Don't you want a priest to replace you?
Right.
So at that point, Father Antonius turns to the Archbishop and says, the only priest I want is Father Panagiotis, who is in America.
Wow. That's funny.
And the Archbishop started laughing. He says, Father Panagiotis is in America. He's going to want to come back to Cyprus and
do what?
And do what, So Father Antonio says to the Archbishop, why don't you call him?
Oh, wow.
All right. So one day, I was not home. Your mom was at home by herself. So the phone rings, we're in Northern Virginia right now. And phone rings, she picks it up, and she says, hello. And she says, may I speak to Father Panagiotis, please? And Catherine says, who is this, please?
She's so cute.
And he says, I am the Archbishop of Cyprus.
Wow.
And she says, okay. He's not home. Can you give me your number, and I'll have him call you back when he gets home.
Right.
And she says, okay. So he actually gave her the number.
Okay.
And they hung up. So I was at the church in Falls Church at that moment, doing something in the office. So I get a call. In those days, we didn't have cell phones, so it was like she called the church, and the church secretary says to me, Father Presbyteria is on the phone. So I get on the phone, and I said, yes, honey, what's going on? She says, you won't believe this. Somebody is pulling a prank on me, on us. I said, what do you mean? He says, I got this phone call, and this man on the other side said he's the Archbishop of Cyprus, and he wants to talk to you.
She thought it was a joke? That's funny. Oh, wow.
So I said, well, so let me come home and we'll check it out. So I went home, I saw the number, I realized that was a number in Cyprus.
A Cypriot number, yeah.
Because he gave the full number.
All those numbers.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I said, well, let's call back and see what happens. So I think it took until the next day to do it, because I wanted to make sure it was during the day.
Yeah, the time difference. Yeah.
So it was like early in the morning. We got up, got on the phone, called the number, and behold, one of the guards at the Archdiocese answered the phone, and I said, I'm Father Panagiotis from the United States. The Archbishop called me yesterday and left me a message. May I talk to him, please? And he got me on the phone. Okay, so he got the Archbishop on the phone, and he invited me to come to Cyprus and go to Ayia Napa and be the priest of Ayia Napa.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how the whole thing started. So
okay.
I said to him, look, I would love to, but right now I'm in the middle of my PhD. I need to finish whatever I'm doing.
Right.
I have at least 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, maybe even more. So and he says, okay. But when you're ready, let me know and we'll take care of it.
Okay.
So
so after that 2 years, when you finished, you called back?
Yeah. 2 years later.
Okay.
We felt we needed to get out of that parish. There were all kinds of things happening. And I didn't really want to take another parish at that point in the United States. Her job, Strati was already born. She quit her job. So
it was time for a change.
We talked about it, and we said, what if we go to Cyprus?
That's amazing. Mom agreed to that.
And she says, will the Archbishop be still open to this? And I said, well, let's find out.
Okay.
So we wake up one morning and we call
again.
We get him on the phone, and I said, Your Eminence Magariota is the term. You called me 2 years ago and you asked me to come. Is that invitation still open?
That's crazy.
He says, oh, yes, of course. I said, when do you want me to come? He says, tomorrow.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, wow.
I said, I cannot come tomorrow. It was like March, I think. March or April.
Yeah.
I said, I cannot come tomorrow, but I will try to come by the end of the year, because I need to wrap up my studies.
Yeah.
We have a home here. We need to sell it or get rid of it or whatever. And he says, okay, just and then I asked him what's the process, to do this, because I was attached to the Archdiocese of America, so I needed to transfer to the Church of Cyprus. So there's a process there. So he explained to me how to do that, and he says, wait until I send a letter, and and when they get the letter at the Archdiocese, they will contact you and whatever. And so we put the process in gear. It was right before Christmas.
When you ended up in Cyprus?
Wow. Yeah. It was like 2 or 3 days before Christmas.
Yaya and Papu must have been like
they were
so
delighted.
ecstatic.
Delighted.
That's awesome. Well, that's good. So you guys moved. What year was that? Was that 93
1983.
or
93. 93.
Yeah.
93. It
I was born in 94.
Well, your mom was pregnant with you, so she was like 3 months away from delivery.
Yep.
Yeah, so you were born in March, so it was the end of
Yeah. It was
December.
right there.
You were born in March.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well,
that was a difficult trip because of the pregnancy and.
Well, she was so soon.
Hours.
Yeah, she was so close to having me.
But we ended up there, and after that, the rest is history.
And you had your sister was there.
My sister was there, and her kids, and
my cousins.
Yeah, and
but your two other brothers stayed.
My two other brothers were in New York. They stayed in New York. They never returned.
Yeah.
But they will come. We will see them more when we're in Cyprus than we see them now.
I know, that's true. Because they would come and visit and
they'll
travel
come and visit and stay for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we see them for a day or two, maybe.
I know. Yeah. That's crazy. Well,
that was interesting too.
I think actually we should stop here.
Okay.
Because that's a really good stopping point. And then next time, which will probably be towards the end of this month, towards the end of December, because you're so busy now, so we have things we have to finish. But we'll continue. Next episode, we'll talk about the experience of being in Cyprus, raising Stradi and I, and then teaching us about the invasion and how you approached it, and then how the school approached it, and just what we experienced in general all together with it, because we all went through it together. So we will definitely continue. Thanks to everybody who's listening, and we will
Thank
keep
you all.
it up. Yeah.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes, Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope
Christmas.
you guys have a wonderful holiday. And if you ever have any questions or need to reach out, my email's connected to everything. So definitely reach out. We'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.